The film began with a high school student called Seun. He was the smartest student in his classroom. He had reserved and introverted personality. Every day, he spent most of his time to study. He didn't have friends at school. His classmates hated him because he was too smart. Because he didn't have friends, nobody respected him at school despite of his great achievements. On the contrary, his classmate called Young Bin was very respected. When Seun received an award as first place winner in a mathematics competition, nobody clapped their hands. But when Young Bin received an award as third place winner, the whole class clapped their hands. Young Bin was a troublemaker in his class, but he was quite smart. There were many students in their classroom who were bullied by him and his group. They also bullied and robbed some money from other students. Young Bin tried to bully Seun when Seun was studying. Young Bin was jealous of Seun because Seun defeated him in the mathematics competition. Even though Seun was an introverted student who didn't have friends, he was never afraid of Young Bin and his group. He didn't even care when Young Bin threatened him. The school baseball team came to their classroom. They were looking for a student called Suho. They wanted to take revenge on Suho for beating up their friends. Even though they tried to beat him up together with baseball bats, Suho managed to defeat them because he was an ex-fighter of MMA. When Seun came home, he gave his certificate of appreciation to his father. His father was proud of him, but Seun wasn't proud of himself because he was lonely even when he was with his family. Seun only lived with his father since their parents got divorced. He lacked of affection from his parents. His father was very busy with his works. Meanwhile, his mother was a teacher who was teaching at a distance. It was difficult for Seun to see his mother. He could only watch his mother's videos every day. Because of his family problem, Seun became a reserved and reclusive person. The next morning, as usual, Seun came early to school. He saw Suho sleeping in their classroom. They had physical education class that day, but Seun couldn't find his tracksuit. He believed Young Bin was the one who stole it. As the consequence, Seun had to wear his uniform in physical education class. Seun was the top student in all classes except physical education class. He wasn't really good in physical education class. After physical education class was over, Seun confronted Young Bin and his group. He asked Young Bin to leave him alone. Young Bin and his group felt humiliated by Seun, so they choked and threatened him. Suddenly, a teacher came and interrupted them. Young Bin and his group stopped what they did. They said that they were just joking around. There was a transfer student called Bum Suk in Seun's classroom. He moved from an elite high school. Bum Suk refused to admit that he came from a wealthy family because he didn't want to be taken advantage of. Seun came and told Young Bin to move from his desk. Young Bin was annoyed by him. Seun took a pen to protect himself in case Young Bin attacked him. Suddenly, Suho told Young Bin and his group to shut up. He was mad because his sleeping was disturbed by them. At night, as usual, Young Bin and his group hanged out in a club and ordered a drug. They did that every day. Young Bin met the drug dealer who was also his cousin. He asked him what would happen if the fentanyl he had ordered was applied to human skin. The drug dealer told him that it would cause confusion, dizziness, blurred vision, nausea, and vomiting. The next day, the class had an examination. As usual, Seun had prepared himself well. Young Bin came late to school. He asked Bum Suk to go with him because he said that their homeroom teacher wanted to meet him. Turned out, Bum Suk was brought to school canteen. Young Bin asked him to apply the fentanyl to Seun's neck while they were taking the examination later. Bum Suk agreed to do what Young Bin told him because he was afraid of him. When they were about to take the examination, Bum Suk tapped Seun's neck from behind. Bum Suk said that there was a fly on Seun's neck. At first, Seun was mad at him, but after the teacher called him, Seun focused back on his examination. While Seun was taking his examination, his vision suddenly started to become blurred. He also had difficulty to stay focused. He left the classroom to go to the bathroom. When Seun returned to his classroom, he realized that there was a fentanyl on his neck. He suddenly slapped his cheek. The whole class was surprised by him. They were paying attention to him. Seun kept slapping his cheek so he could stay focused. After the class had finished taking the examination, they began to check their answers. Seun realized that he had one incorrect answer. He got frustrated because of it. He got up from his chair, brought a pen, and attacked Young Bin relentlessly. He also stabbed Young Bin's friend with his pen. Young Bin fell from his chair with a face that was covered in blood. There was nobody in the classroom who dared to intervene Seun. When Seun tried to step on Young Bin's face, Sue suddenly stopped him and pushed him away. He thought that it was too much. Seun was annoyed by him. He took a chair to fight him. Unfortunately, Sue managed to avoid his attacks. Suddenly a teacher came to their classroom. Because of that incident, Young Bin had to be admitted to hospital for treatment. Seun was taken by his teacher to apologize to Young Bin's parents, but Young Bin's mother kept scolding him because she was furious at him. Seun told her that he was drugged with a fentanyl by Young Bin while they were taking an examination. At first, Young Bin denied that the fentanyl was his, but Si-eun proved what he said by rummaging in Young Bin's bag. A box of fentanyl was found in his bag. Young Bin's mother was shocked to see that. Finally, the school decided to transfer Young Bin to another school. They also agreed to keep this incident of drug use by their student as a secret to keep their good reputation. When Si-eun returned home, he didn't say anything about what happened at school that day. Si-eun's father suspected that Si-eun had gotten into a fight, but he didn't care about it. He thought it was a normal thing that happened among teenagers. The next day, two of Young Bin's friends approached Si-eun angrily. They asked him to meet them after school, but without a single fear. Si-eun asked them to meet him right at that time. They didn't need to wait until the school was over. With angry faces, Young Bin's friends followed Si-eun to a bathroom. Si-eun closed the bathroom's door so nobody could see them. They didn't realize that Si-eun had brought his favorite weapon, which was his pen. As Si-eun was walking toward them step by step, they were getting intimidated by him. They remembered the incident where Si-eun was getting out of control. They couldn't move their body when they remembered it. Apparently, Si-eun didn't want to attack them. He only told them to leave him alone. When Si-eun came out of the bathroom, all of his classmates praised him for defeating Young Bin and his group. Si-eun was annoyed by them because suddenly they were being friendly to him. All this time, they had ostracized him and pretended like he didn't exist. Young Bin was visited by his cousin. Suk-dae warned Young Bin to not overdo anything. Young Bin asked Suk-dae to beat up Si-eun. He would pay him if he was willing to do it. At night, when Si-eun was heading home, he saw Soo working part-time. Apparently, apart from being a student, Soo also worked part-time as a food delivery courier at a restaurant. After school, he would go to work so he could earn some money to survive. Since he lost his parents, he only lived with his grandmother. But after he finished working, he didn't come home. He chose to sleep at school instead because he would come late to school if he slept at home. After Si-eun found out about Soo's story, he didn't wake him up every morning anymore. He appreciated his effort, so he let him sleep for more before everyone came. Si-eun and Soo became closer to each other since then. However, Si-eun still didn't get used to be open with other people. Young Bin met Suk-dae to talk about the job he offered him yesterday. Suk-dae was a member of a collection agency who lent money and collected debt, so he was down to do any high-paying job. After school, Bum-suk tried to apologize to Si-eun for what he had done. He offered himself to accompany Si-eun to go to another school for a tutoring, but Si-eun ignored him. Suddenly, Si-eun was stopped by Young Bin and Suk-dae's gang. They took Si-eun with them. After Bum-suk saw that, he reported it immediately to Soo. At first, Soo didn't care because it wasn't his business. He also had to go to work after this. But after Bum-suk said that he would pay him double of his salary, Soo changed his mind. He was looking for Si-eun immediately. In a quiet alley, Si-eun was being intimidated by Suk-dae and his gang. Since Si-eun was a person who had always analyzed and calculated his actions, he managed to fight them back. But when Si-eun dropped his guard, he was getting attacked again. Young Bin used this moment to take revenge on him by beating him up relentlessly. He also tried to break Si-eun's hand so he couldn't study. But suddenly, Soo came to save Si-eun. He managed to defeat Young Bin and his friends with his skills. But their fight wasn't over. Suk-dae asked Soo to fight one by one. When Young Bin and his friends saw Si-eun alone, they wanted to beat him up again. The situation was getting worse. Young Bin wanted to attack Si-eun with a bottle. Soo couldn't stop him because Suk-dae kept attacking him. Luckily, Bum-suk suddenly came to save Si-eun. Suk-dae finally left and decided to let Si-eun and his friends go. Meanwhile, Young Bin just stood there and realized that he had lost again. Since that incident, Si-eun and the others became closer to each other. Soo took Bum-suk and Si-eun to the restaurant where he was working. He told them to help him working because they made him late to go to work. They spent their night together by having dinner at that restaurant. But as usual, Si-eun still didn't get used to spend time with people. Suk-dae's boss, who was called Gil-soo, was mad because of the incident. He didn't like if Suk-dae took another job. He punished Suk-dae by hitting his hand with a block of wood. After that, Suk-dae met Young Bin to ask him to bring Si-eun to him. Si-eun encountered a member of Suk-dae's gang called Young-yi who was stealing something at supermarket. Si-eun ignored her and pretended like he didn't see that. When he was about to leave after purchasing an umbrella, Young-yi was being friendly to him. She asked Si-eun to go to a restaurant with her. Si-eun couldn't do anything but to accept her offer. Young-yi confessed to Si-eun that she began to have a crush on him. She also asked for Si-eun's phone numbers. Gil-soo was collecting payments of debts from a high school student who owed him some money. That student gave his mother's car as a loan guarantee because he was unable to pay off his debts. Even though he had given Gil-soo a car as a loan guarantee, Gil-soo still threatened him to kill him and his parents if he didn't pay off his debts in 3 days. The next day, when Young Bin packed his things in the classroom, he asked Si-eun to have a conversation with him. Turned out, Young Bin wanted Si-eun to be a court witness to testify that he didn't own any fentanyl because he didn't want to be put in a youth detention center. He told him that he was the only hope for his parents. Si-eun felt bad for him, so he agreed to do what he wanted. Si-eun were heading to the court with his friends, but Young Bin took them to a car park of a building instead. Si-eun and his friends suspected him because they didn't go to the court. Apparently, Young Bin had lied and tricked them to meet Gil-soo and his gang. Gil-soo asked them to pay him $15,000 because he didn't have health insurance to cover for Suk-dae's broken hand. But Soo didn't remember that he injured Suk-dae's hand severely. Gil-soo was the one who broke Suk-dae's hand and then blamed Soo for it. He did it so he could get some money from him and his friends. Gil-soo told them to pay him in 3 days. If they couldn't do it, they had to lend money from him to pay him. We could see how sly and manipulative Gil-soo was. He even threatened to kill them if they refused to do what he told them. After that unwanted meeting, Si-eun and his friends were followed and watched by Gil-soo and his gang every day. Si-eun called Young-hee to ask for an explanation about the problem he was facing. He hoped that Young-hee could give him an important information. They finally agreed to meet at a restaurant. Young-hee told Si-eun about who Gil-soo was. Apparently, Gil-soo was a type of a person who would do anything for money, including murder. Young-hee told Si-eun to pay Gil-soo if he didn't want to be in any danger. She also told him that Gil-soo were friends with many gangsters, so it would be hard to run away from him. Bum-suk was stealing his father's watch so he could sell it and have some money to pay Gil-soo. Finally, 3 days had passed since Gil-soo threatened Si-eun and his friends. They had a meeting in a room. Bum-suk managed to collect $15,000 from selling his father's watch, but he told them that he got the money from his father. Si-eun and Soo were mad at him because they didn't believe that Bum-suk's father was willing to give him that much money. Even though they had the money, they refused to give that money to Gil-soo for free. They decided to call the police instead. Si-eun told them about the important information he got from Young-hee last night. Apparently, Gil-soo had an illegal gambling site for minors, especially for high school students. People would receive $50 for free for each account they registered on Gil-soo's gambling site, which was being operated overseas. Young-hee said that the gambling site was a fraud. The players would win and receive many bonuses for several first games, but after they got addicted to it, the site owner would use their addiction to take their money and defeat them in every game. Where there were gambling sites players, there were bound to be Gil-soo's gang. When those players ran out of money, Gil-soo's gang would approach them to lend them money so they could keep playing on the gambling site. As the consequence, the players would owe them money and couldn't pay their debts off because they had lost all of their money on the gambling site. It was one of Gil-soo's evil strategy to exploit children to get addicted to gambling, so they could lend money from him and gave him their valuables as long guarantees, such as cars, gold bars, etc. Young-hee also told Si-eun that Gil-soo put his valuables such as transactions, drugs, etc. in a strongbox. Because of that, Si-eun wanted to call police and bring them to that place. With all evidences inside of that strongbox, Gil-soo would get arrested by the policeman. After school, Gil-soo and his gang had been waiting for Si-eun and his friends. Soo said that he would meet Gil-soo by himself. He planned to ask Gil-soo to take him to his office to talk about Gil-soo's gambling site. When he arrived there, he would tell Si-eun about his location so Si-eun could call and bring the policeman there. At first, Gil-soo was surprised that Soo knew about his gambling site. Soo said that Suk-dae's cousin, Young Bin, told him about it. Gil-soo finally took Soo to his office with him because he had no option. Before they left, Young-hee told Gil-soo that she would stay at school to wait for Bum-suk and Si-eun. After that, Young-hee met Si-eun to give him the address of Gil-soo's office. Si-eun didn't realize it sooner that Soo didn't have to go with Gil-soo to get Gil-soo's address. Bum-suk was worrying about Soo. He wanted to follow him with a taxi. Si-eun let him go because he wanted to see if Young-hee gave him the right address. Suk-dae interrogated Young-hee for knowing Si-eun and revealing such an important information to him. Young-hee told him that she was sick of Gil-soo. She planned to call the police on him. She said that she couldn't live under Gil-soo's pressure forever. Soo arrived at Gil-soo's office. He gave Gil-soo's address to Si-eun immediately. It was the same address as the one that was given by Young-hee. Soo walked inside of the office. Since Gil-soo always kept his guard up, he asked Soo to give him his phone. He had been suspecting that Soo had planned something. Soo refused to give his phone. His head was hit very hard with an iron stick that he fell from his chair. Gil-soo finally found out about Soo's plan to call the police on him. After he found out about it, he packed his things and left that place immediately. Bum-suk arrived there and encountered Gil-soo, who was trying to run away. Bum-suk didn't know what had happened, so he tried to give Gil-soo the money, because the situation had become worse. Gil-soo ignored the money and took Bum-suk with him to leave that place. Si-eun was heading to Gil-soo's office. As he and the policeman arrived there, they didn't find anyone. The policemen put off their search because of that. They also realized that they didn't have an arrest warrant, so they couldn't proceed with their search. Because the policeman didn't help him, Si-eun broke into the house by climbing the wall and breaking the door. He was surprised to see blood on the floor. He thought that it was Soo's blood. He tried to call Soo on phone, but Soo didn't answer his call. Si-eun was shocked to find that the transactions, drugs, and Gil-soo's other valuables in the strongbox had been taken by Gil-soo. Suk-dae got a new problem. Gil-soo found out that Suk-dae and Young-hee had conspired with Si-eun against him. Gil-soo threatened to sell Young-ee's brother called Sung-chan if Suk-dae and Young-ee didn't come to Mangdodong. Suk-dae decided to meet Gil-soo. He gave his bank card to Young-ee so she could find a hotel to hide. But Young-ee didn't want Suk-dae to meet Gil-soo alone. She wanted to go with him. She asked Si-eun to download an application that enabled him to share location, so Si-eun could track Suk-dae and Young-ee's location. Gil-soo and his gang had been waiting for Suk-dae and Young-ee. Apparently, they had taken Bum Suk and Soo-hoo as their hostages. Si-eun was heading to Young-ee's location. Since Gil-soo had found out about Young-ee's conspiration, Suk-dae challenged Gil-soo for a fight. But because Suk-dae's hand was still severely broken, he had difficulty in fighting Gil-soo. He was attacked relentlessly by Gil-soo. Young-ee couldn't help Suk-dae because she was seized by Gil-soo's gang. Gil-soo wanted to kill Soo-hoo and Bum Suk, but suddenly Suk-dae got up and attacked him. Despite he had a little difficulty, he still fought Suk-dae. He was defeated by Gil-soo, who used a knife to attack him. Suddenly, Young-ee helped Suk-dae by hitting Gil-soo's head. But as a woman who didn't have as much strength as Gil-soo, she couldn't fight Gil-soo when he choked her. Luckily, the sound of siren from police car was heard. Gil-soo and his gang ran away quickly. Si-eun came and told Gil-soo to surrender because the policemen had surrounded them. Gil-soo and his gang came back after Si-eun helped Bum Suk and Soo-hoo to escape. Turned out, the siren sound only came from a phone. Gil-soo's gang and Si-eun's group got into a fight. Suk-dae and Young-ee were about to run away from that place when they saw some policemen arrive there. Turned out, Si-eun used the siren sound audio to trick Gil-soo and his gang.